The committee hearing had been moving along in its usual way, with prepared statements, back and forth questioning, and the occasional political jab. It wasn't until Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett adjusted the microphone in front of her that the energy in the room shifted. She leaned forward, her expression calm but deliberate, and began speaking in a tone that carried both confidence and weight. What she said next would be replayed countless times on social media, dissected on cable news, and debated endlessly online. Crockett began by stating that the American people deserved transparency, especially when it came to those who had held the highest office in the nation. She paused briefly, scanning the room as if measuring the effect of her words, and then dropped the first in a series of allegations about Donald Trump. She claimed to have reviewed documents, some public and some not widely circulated, that pointed to what she called troubling patterns in his financial dealings. She mentioned that certain business arrangements appeared to be deliberately obscured through layers of shell companies. Some of these companies, she claimed, had been tied to questionable foreign interests. Crockett spoke without raising her voice, but her words had a sharpness to them. She referenced transactions that, according to her, raised legal and ethical concerns, especially for someone who had once sat in the Oval Office. As she laid out these claims, she brought up the issue of tax filings. Without going into deep, technical detail, Crockett suggested that some of Trump's reported earnings and losses did not align with the records she had seen. The insinuation was clear that there was more to the story than what had been disclosed to the public. She stopped short of making outright legal accusations, but she painted a picture that was difficult to ignore. Throughout her statement, she referred to Trump by name several times, linking his personal brand of business strategy to what she called a pattern of concealment. It wasn't just about money, she argued. It was about the trust between elected leaders and the people they serve. She suggested that when someone in power operates in ways that appear to hide information, it undermines the public's faith in government institutions. Crockett also pointed to Trump's past denials and the public narrative he had built around his wealth and success. She contrasted that image with the details she claimed were buried in paperwork, asserting that the public image and the private reality did not match. She acknowledged that many of these issues had been the subject of legal disputes before, but she implied that the scope was wider than most people realized. Members of the committee listened closely, some nodding in agreement, others shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Karoline Leavitt, seated further down the dais, kept her eyes fixed on Crockett, flipping through her own documents, but clearly tracking every word. Crockett continued, citing what she said were connections between Trump's businesses and certain overseas entities. She didn't offer physical copies of the evidence on the spot, but she made it clear she believed it was only a matter of time before more of it came to light. Reporters in the press section typed furiously, knowing they were witnessing a moment that would dominate headlines. Crockett, for her part, seemed aware of the magnitude of what she was saying, but she maintained a measured composure. She didn't shout, didn't resort to theatrical gestures. Instead, she delivered her remarks with the air of someone who had done her homework and was confident in her position. As she spoke, she also addressed the criticism she knew would come. She anticipated accusations of partisanship and dismissed them preemptively, saying her goal was to hold leaders accountable, regardless of party. Yet the focus of her remarks stayed firmly on Trump, on his alleged financial irregularities, and on what she viewed as deliberate efforts to keep certain information out of public view. For many in the room, it was the specificity of her language that caught attention. She didn't just accuse Trump of wrongdoing in broad terms. She referenced dates, types of transactions, and entities involved. Even without producing documents then and there, her words had the ring of preparation and research. Whether or not her claims would stand up to legal scrutiny, the fact that she aired them in such a public and high-profile forum ensured that they would be taken seriously, at least in the short term. By the time Crockett finished speaking, the hearing room felt different. Conversations had quieted, and even some of her political opponents appeared to be processing what they had just heard. The cameras captured it all, her steady delivery, the occasional raised eyebrow from fellow members, and the momentary pause before the chair of the committee moved on to the next speaker. The impact of her statement was immediate, and it was clear that her decision to put Trump's name and these allegations on the record would have consequences far beyond that room. Karoline Leavitt had been sitting patiently as Jasmine Crockett delivered her remarks, but her body language told its own story. The moment Crockett began mentioning Donald Trump by name and weaving a series of accusations around his finances and business dealings, Leavitt's posture shifted. She leaned back slightly in her chair, arms crossed, eyes narrowed in a way that suggested she was weighing every single word. By the time Crockett wrapped up her statement, Leavitt was ready. When the committee chair recognized her to speak, Leavitt didn't waste time. She began by addressing the chair directly, saying it was deeply concerning that a congressional platform was being used. In her words, to spread unverified and politically motivated misinformation. She pointed out that Trump had faced extensive legal and media scrutiny for years, and that many of the allegations Crockett was now repeating had either been disproven or dismissed by the courts. Asterisk, her voice was steady but firm, and she chose her words carefully. She accused Crockett of engaging in what she described as political theater designed not to inform the public, but to score partisan points and create viral media clips. Leavitt emphasized that this kind of rhetoric eroded public trust not just in individuals like Trump, but in the institutions of government itself. Asterisk, as she spoke, Leavitt repeatedly brought Trump's name into the conversation, framing him as a target of ongoing political vendettas. She reminded the committee that, like any citizen, Trump was entitled to the presumption of innocence unless proven otherwise. She questioned the timing of Crockett's claims, suggesting they were strategically delivered to generate headlines, rather than to contribute meaningfully to the committee's work. Asterisk, Leavitt also addressed the financial allegations head-on. She noted that Trump's business empire was large, complex, and global in scope, and that it was normal for such enterprises to involve multiple entities and transactions across jurisdictions. She pushed back on the implication that complexity automatically equated to wrongdoing. In her view, Crockett was taking advantage of the fact that most Americans don't have first-hand experience navigating the business structures of a global real estate brand. Asterisk, turning the focus back to the committee's responsibilities, argued that their time should be spent on substantive legislative oversight, not on amplifying accusations that, in her view, had been recycled from partisan talking points. She warned that repeating these claims without evidence could contribute to misinformation spreading far beyond the hearing room, especially in an age where soundbites travel faster than context. Asterisk, at one point, she directed her remarks toward the broader audience beyond the committee, the millions watching the hearing live, or who would see the clips later. She said it was vital for the public to recognize when statements were grounded in fact and when they were built on speculation or selective information. Without naming media outlets, she hinted that some in the press were eager to amplify anti-Trump narratives without applying the same scrutiny to other political figures. Asterisk, Leavitt's rebuttal also carried a personal edge. She spoke about her own experiences defending conservative policies and figures, and how, in her view, Trump's presidency had been under constant siege from the day he announced his candidacy. She painted the ongoing scrutiny as less about accountability and more about dismantling the influence of a political movement that threatened established power structures in Washington. Asterisk, throughout her remarks, she kept returning to the theme of fairness. She insisted that if the committee truly cared about transparency and ethics, it would apply the same intensity of investigation to other prominent political figures, including those on the Democratic side, rather than focusing so singularly on Trump. To her, Crockett's decision to highlight alleged dirty secrets was proof of selective outrage. Asterisk, by the time she finished, Leavitt had turned the hearing from a moment of accusation into a moment of defense. While Crockett had spent her time laying out alleged misdeeds, Leavitt used hers to frame Trump as the victim of a continuous and politically driven narrative. She never once softened her tone, even when interrupted by murmurs from across the dais. Asterisk, for Leavitt, this wasn't just about defending Trump the individual, it was about pushing back against what she saw as a pattern in American politics, where accusations could be enough to damage reputations, regardless of whether they were substantiated. And in her view, Crockett's remarks had been just that, an unsubstantiated political maneuver dressed up as a call for transparency. The hearing had ended, but the tension it stirred lingered like a heavy cloud in the corridors of Capitol Hill. Karoline Leavitt, after exchanging a few brief words with colleagues, gathered her papers and walked out without addressing reporters. Those who saw her said she was moving with a sense of purpose, her phone already in her hand. Within minutes, she was in a quieter corner of the building, speaking in a low but urgent tone. She was calling the Capitol Police. Asterisk, according to those familiar with the matter. Leavitt told the officers she had serious concerns about what had transpired during the hearing, particularly about the documents Jasmine Crockett had referenced. While making her allegations against Donald Trump, in Leavitt's view, there was a possibility that the material Crockett held up, and the way she described it, could involve breaches of security protocols or even violations of confidentiality rules. She wanted law enforcement to determine whether any laws had been broken in the process of obtaining or displaying them. Asterisk, Trump's name came up more than once in her account to the police. Leavitt explained that the hearing had become a venue for airing accusations against a former president, and she argued that this raised the stakes when it came to verifying the legitimacy and security clearance of any supporting documents. She stressed that the material could have been manipulated, taken out of context, or presented in a misleading way, and that in the wrong hands, such actions could have legal consequences. Asterisk, within minutes of the call, uniformed Capitol Police officers began appearing in the committee wing. They spoke quietly with staffers, asking about the chain of custody for documents shown in the hearing. Witnesses say they also reviewed footage to see exactly what Crockett had displayed and how it had been introduced into the record, while no immediate action was taken against any member of Congress. The mere presence of law enforcement drew attention. Asterisk, Leavitt's critics were quick to accuse her of overreacting, framing the call as an attempt to intimidate a political opponent. But her allies defended the move, saying it was about safeguarding the integrity of the institution and ensuring that no sensitive or classified materials had been mishandled. For Leavitt, the point wasn't just about procedural rules, it was about the precedent being set. If one lawmaker could use potentially unverified documents to publicly accuse someone as high-profile as Trump, what would stop others from doing the same to anyone in the future? She told reporters later, in a brief statement, that she believed no one, not even members of Congress, should be above the law when it comes to handling sensitive information. Although she didn't directly accuse Crockett of breaking the law, she made it clear she wanted an investigation to either confirm the documents' legitimacy or expose them as fabricated or misrepresented. She also pointed out that false or misleading information, once aired in a hearing and amplified by the media, could cause irreversible reputational harm, something she said Trump had experienced repeatedly over the years. In her telling, this wasn't just about protecting Trump as an individual, it was about defending the standards of evidence in the public arena. She argued that political discourse should be rooted in verified facts, not in what she called trial by microphone. She was adamant that if the documents were genuine, they should have been properly vetted before being introduced in a public forum, and if they weren't genuine, then their use was a dangerous abuse of congressional privilege. The call to the police also had a ripple effect inside the building. Staffers became more cautious about the materials they handled, and whispers of an investigation spread quickly. Members from both parties privately admitted they were curious about what would come of it, though few were willing to speak publicly for fear of being dragged into the controversy. For Leavitt, the choice to involve law enforcement was a calculated one. She knew it would spark criticism, especially from those who viewed Trump as fair game for public scrutiny. But she also believed that allowing Crockett's presentation to go unchallenged would only encourage more of the same in future hearings. In her mind, the call to the police was about drawing a line, one that, once crossed, could undermine the credibility of congressional proceedings altogether. The incident, whether seen as an act of prudence or political gamesmanship, ensured that the clash between Crockett and Leavitt would not end with the sound of a gavel. It had moved beyond the hearing room, into the realm of official inquiry, with Trump's name still at the center of the storm. News of the clash between Jasmine Crockett and Karoline Leavitt spread quickly after the hearing, but the moment Leavitt's call to the Capitol Police became public, the story took on an entirely new dimension. Political commentators began dissecting the sequence of events, weighing the implications, and speculating on what it all meant for Donald Trump, whose name had been at the heart of the controversy from the very beginning. Cable news networks ran split-screen coverage, one side replaying Crockett's allegations about Trump's business dealings, the other showing clips of Leavitt's rebuttal and footage of Capitol Police officers walking through the committee wing. The framing varied depending on the network. Some portrayed Crockett as a whistleblower, bringing uncomfortable truths into the light, while others cast Leavitt as a defender of due process and fairness, standing up against what she saw as political character assassination. In the days following, the political fallout deepened. On the Democratic side, several lawmakers rallied behind Crockett, praising her for having the courage to speak about Trump's alleged misconduct in a public forum. They argued that any attempt to dissuade or investigate her actions was an attack on transparency. Progressive activists amplified her statements across social media, turning snippets of her remarks into viral videos. On the Republican side, Leavitt's decision to call the police was defended as an act of accountability. Allies claimed she was protecting not just Trump, but the integrity of congressional hearings. They pointed out that documents shown during such proceedings should be vetted for accuracy and legality before being broadcast live to millions. In their view, Crockett's decision to present unverified material about Trump crossed a line, and Leavitt was right to respond decisively. The debate wasn't limited to Capitol Hill. Across the country, political talk shows, podcasts, and online forums were buzzing with arguments over who had acted appropriately and who had overstepped. For Trump supporters, the incident was just the latest example of what they saw as an ongoing effort to tarnish his reputation through allegations that often failed to hold up under scrutiny. They noted that even when claims against him were later disproven or dropped, the damage to his public image lingered. Meanwhile, Trump himself didn't stay silent for long. In a short social media post, he thanked Leavitt for standing up against the lies and accused Crockett of playing politics at the expense of truth. His statement was quickly shared by conservative influencers, adding fuel to the already blazing media firestorm. While Trump didn't offer a detailed rebuttal to Crockett's claims, his message framed the entire exchange as part of a larger pattern, one in which he, and by extension his movement, was constantly under attack from what he called the corrupt establishment. As the story continued to unfold, it became clear that the incident had widened the existing political divide. For Democrats, the focus was on the content of Crockett's remarks and what they argued was the public's right to know about it. Former president's financial dealings. For Republicans, the focus was on the process, the rules, and the need to prevent hearings from turning into platforms for unchecked accusations. Even within the media, there was disagreement. Some journalists insisted the story was about the specific allegations Crockett made, urging further investigation into Trump's business records. Others said the real story was the precedent Leavitt's police call might set, questioning whether it could be used in the future to intimidate lawmakers from speaking freely during hearings. The controversy also had practical consequences inside. Congress committee chairs began quietly discussing ways to tighten oversight of materials presented. During hearings, there was talk of implementing additional verification steps, especially in cases involving sensitive or high-profile figures like Trump. Staffers became more cautious about what they brought into the public record, knowing that one misstep could lead to a public relations nightmare. For Leavitt, the days following the incident were a mix of praise and criticism. Her defenders lauded her for acting swiftly in the face of what they saw as an improper attack on Trump. Her detractors accused her of weaponizing law enforcement to shield a political ally from scrutiny. Both sides agreed on one thing: the incident had ensured that the feud between her and Crockett would not be forgotten anytime soon. And for Trump, the clash became another rallying point. He cited it in speeches, weaving it into his broader narrative of being targeted by political opponents. Whether the allegations Crockett had leveled would lead anywhere remained uncertain, but the battle over them, and Leavitt's intervention, had already cemented its place as a flashpoint in the ongoing struggle over his legacy and his influence in American politics. In the end, the confrontation between Jasmine Crockett and Karoline Leavitt was far more than just another heated exchange on Capitol Hill. It became a moment that encapsulated the sharp political divide in America, the growing distrust between parties, and the different ways each side interprets the concept of accountability. What began as a routine committee hearing turned into a headline-generating clash that pulled in the attention of millions, not only because of what was said, but because of what happened afterward. Crockett's decision to publicly air allegations about Donald Trump's business dealings was seen by her supporters as an act of courage, a necessary step toward holding powerful figures to account. For her, transparency meant putting information into the public sphere, even if it risked controversy. She believed that the American people had a right to hear the details, to consider them, and to decide for themselves what to believe. Approach resonated strongly with those who have long called for deeper scrutiny into Trump's past. On the other hand, Leavitt's forceful rebuttal and subsequent call to the Capitol Police reflected a very different philosophy. For her, the issue was not just about the allegations themselves, but about the process by which they were presented. She argued that hearings should not be arenas for unverified claims, and that public discourse, especially in official proceedings, must be grounded in facts that have been vetted. By involving law enforcement, she made it clear that she believed procedural safeguards had to be enforced, even if that meant facing accusations of political maneuvering. Trump's role in all of this, while indirect, was central. His name and the reputation were once again placed in the middle of a political storm, and the incident became another chapter in the ongoing saga of his post-presidential life. For his supporters, it was further proof of what they see as relentless attacks from the political establishment. For his critics, it was another opportunity to highlight concerns about his conduct and his business practices. The public reaction demonstrated just how polarized the political landscape has become. Every new development was filtered through partisan lenses. Every statement, every media clip, every opinion. For some, Crockett's actions symbolized bravery. For others, recklessness. For some, Leavitt's actions embodied integrity. For others, intimidation. And somewhere in between were Americans who were simply trying to make sense of it all, unsure of where the truth lay. As the dust began to settle, one thing was certain: this would not be the last time such a conflict played out in the halls of Congress. The tools, tactics, and rhetoric used in this episode are now part of the broader political playbook. Whether the incident ultimately fades into the background or shapes future congressional norms will depend on what comes next, not only for Crockett and Leavitt, but for the country as a whole, and for Donald Trump, whose name continues to